Bonjour, and welcome everyone this evening to our webinar where we are talking all things pharmaceuticals and all things personalization of medicine, which given my guest speakers this evening, we're so excited to talk about because these are the very people that are able to tell you both about the power medications can offer, but separately, how that power needs to be properly utilized and how knowing your genes is part of that conversation, is part of that power. So welcome this evening. I have two brilliant, wonderful PharmDs. I have Dr. Stephanie Nielsen, who is a common frequent offender on these webinars, and I have a new face, someone who will become a frequent offender, Dr. Gabby Gutierrez. Dr. Gabby, welcome, welcome, welcome. I wonder if you can take a
Thank
moment and just
you.
introduce yourselves to our audience tonight.
Of course, I'm happy to offend. So thank you guys so much, Dr. Koshman, Dr. Nielsen. I'm Dr. Gabby. I'm a PharmD and CFGP. I've had a pretty, you know, wonderful history in pharmacy. I've got to work in a lot of different fields from hospital, retail, specialty, marketing, and ambulatory. So I think that through all of that, my passion for patient care and med safety brought me to pharmacogenomics. So that brought me to you guys, and I'm so grateful and I'm so excited to nerd out about it with you.
Delightful. Yeah. Sometimes we have requirements of glasses, but we won't hold you to that today. I'm
Oh, next
teasing.
time.
I'm teasing. So why don't we set the stage? And as we're doing this to the audience out there, as you know, we like to ensure that what we're offering is content you care about. So please, as we're introducing the idea of personalized pharmacogenomics, please fill out our survey so that as we continue our conversations, we can really speak to you and what you're here to learn from us. So as you're filling out those surveys, Gabby, Steph, let's talk about pharmacy, namely how it is becoming precise, but kind of the history of how it was imprecise and some of the drawbacks that would happen from that.
Well, I can tell you when I was in pharmacy school, I took all the slough classes, which
Mhm.
were pharmacocognizance. And
Mhm.
pharmacocognizance comes from which plants did the original pharmaceuticals come from? Which natural substances did they come from? And my professors would criticize me and say, why do you take slough classes? You're one of the top students. And I'd say, I don't consider them slough classes. This is a history class. This
Yeah.
is a class on where did the interest in pharmacy come from? Where did the biochemistry? I said, this is all biochemistry and this is all, refinement. And then how did it become a pharmaceutical? Well, fast forward, after I got out of pharmacy school and was dissatisfied with just handing out pills, then I went back and got my board certification in clinical nutrition and used that biochemistry with the history of natural supplements to find a way to help people heal. Gabby, what did you graduated a little bit later than I have.
Yeah, 2023. So very recent. And you know what? Honestly, Dr. Nielsen, not much has changed. We get a pretty good idea, especially with our oncology and cardio meds. Those are things that we have to test for. But in general, the prevention, kind of that education of the patient on, why this matters, why this means a lot, to advocate for yourself, it's not there entirely. Again, it's kind of more of a specialty. We're very lucky. There's a lot of pharmacogenomics pharmacists and the community is great, so we're growing. But yeah, there's still a lot of work to be done as of 2023.
Do they even offer pharmacy cognicy anymore? I bet they don't.
I've never heard of that. So
Okay, so like
I wish I did. That sounds fun.
yeah, it is funny. So foxglove, which is a beautiful flower, turns into digitalis. Okay. And so digoxin comes from digitalis. And so we learned about all that history. And literally, it was almost like folk medicine. Well, folk medicine is one of my favorite things. So, yeah, I had a feeling they had wiped it all out,
I
but
like
we're going to bring it back.
I like where you're starting this story though, right? Because I think to a certain extent, some people think pharmacy is this net new field that all of a sudden we decided to go into a laboratory, shove all these chemicals together and offer them as a pill. And that was the beginning of it. But Steph, you're really highlighting to us that there's a huge lineage that initially was plants because that was the laboratory we had access to. And
Right.
we knew that if you use foxglove, this was something that would impact the cardiovascular system. And, up until we brought that into a lab to study, there was this traditional wisdom that said, if you give this much, here are some of the side effect profiles. And you don't want to be giving it to this group of people, right? Because of the side effect profiles. And now, we see that blending into pharmacy. And now with pharmacogenomics, we see that tradition even further specifying
Mhm.
to the end of we know not even just based on a person's demographics and how they're presenting in clinic, but we know at a cellular level, at a DNA and genetic level, how they might respond to this. So we have more information as to that prescription.
Yeah, I love it. April says, I'm also a pharmacist. Welcome, pharmacy night. And she said, I'm a pharmacist, and we had weeds and seeds was one of their classes, but it's no longer offered.
That.
Oh, I
That is
love
awesome.
that.
Well, and you
amazing.
bring up a good point, Krista, which is how many of us can think back to our grandmothers or our great grandmothers? My great grandmother had this remedy. My grandmother always had us, if we got coughs and colds, did XYZ, whether it was
Yeah.
Vicks Vapor Rub on the chest
Yeah.
or whether it was my grandmother did the coolest thing. It's not really pharmacy, but every time we get a splinter, have you ever had one of those splinters you cannot get out of your finger? You dig and dig and dig, and it's still something's in there. She would take a piece of raw bacon fat and she would put the
Oh,
raw bacon fat on our finger. This is going to be your takeaway for tonight, everybody. And then she would wrap a band-aid around it and we would leave it on 1 to 2 days. The fat from the salt in the bacon fat will extract, and then so what happens is the skin gets softened and moisturized with the lard basically, and the salt extracts, and that will draw as a drawing agent. And by the first or second day, that splinter will be laying on that bacon fat on your Band-Aid.
yeah.
And it was like, I can tell you, we've done it 2 or 3 times. Nobody this day talks about this. They would slice your finger open, they would pull it out, they would risk getting an infection. You need some bacon fat. So I love that we can use those kind of tools, but now we also have very sophisticated tools that are backed by science, not just grandma's knowing, to really help people in the selection. Or here's something that you may not have heard in pharmacy school, Gabby. There are no such thing as side effects. Do you realize that?
Yes.
They're all direct effects.
Yeah,
Because they
absolutely.
directly affect the body, but it's not the direct effect that was being marketed. So it is termed a side effect.
It's a branding. It's a
Yeah, it
branding.
is. It's a
Branding,
branding.
marketing.
Mhm,
Yeah, yeah.
mhm.
And I think that's, I know we really have for the audience, we haven't delved into what exactly these tests are, but that's the power of these tests, knowing that with this agent and your genes, you are more likely or less likely to be experiencing what many people would call an adverse effect, but also a direct effect. We know that the agent in your DNA, in your body, in your biochemistry is going to create this response, right? Not an adverse reaction, it's just what it's doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
So I
maybe
wonder,
should we do the polls?
yeah,
Yeah.
can the powers that be pop up those polls? All right. So we asked the question of what brought you to this webinar today, and 50%, most of our audience here is saying general curiosity about genetics and medicine. So welcome, you're in the right space. And then the close second contender there is they want to further personalize their medicine. They're already aware that there's a lot of personalization that can be done, and so understanding that. We asked the question of, has anyone here ever done pharmacogenomic testing before? A majority, actually 85% of our audience has said no, with a mix between they're interested and don't know much about it. So 15%, strong 15% saying they have. Um, This is going to be a big topic of conversation this evening, asking the question of how many medications are you currently taking? So our audience defies a lot of statistics, insofar as 50% of the audience is not taking any. Love this. And about 30% of our audience, yes, Dr. Staff, round of applause there. About 30% of our audience is saying 1 to 2. And then the balance of our audience is saying 3 and up, with a small percentage doing more than 6. The last question that we have, and this really speaks to, especially some of those prescriptions, is what's your age breakdown, right? So most of our audience here tonight is over the beauty of 60. And then the next group that we're seeing here, about 35%, we're seeing 45 to 60. So welcome to everyone. There's a strong 2% that's under 30. Welcome. We adore having you. Thank you for joining us.
An interesting statistic that you should know is it is a good generality to say for every decade of life, a patient will have one pharmaceutical agent that they buy monthly. I'm not talking about antibiotics once a year. I'm not talking about getting a little Sudafed if you get a stuffy nose. I'm talking about a blood pressure medicine, a diabetes medicine, a thyroid medicine. But if you noticed, we had the largest majority of 60, 70, and 80, because we know we have a lot of octogenarians. We love you guys. And yet we had less than 6% that had said they had 6. So if we throw most of the people in that 3 to 5, you're below the national averages. And we do see that with our participants. We see that they tend to be more proactive with health. They tend to be more proactive with diet. They tend to try non-pharmaceuticals first or resist them to the last bit. And I value that, because I walk that real east-west barrier or line where it's like, let's try to do it with lifestyle. Let's try to do it with culinary medicine. Let's try to do it with supplementation, because we have fewer side effects or negative effects if we need to. But if we just can't move the needle, the whole point is move the needle, and then don't feel badly about it. If you need an SSRI, then great. Let's just find the right one for you so that you don't need to lump a lot of other stuff on it. Because whether it's a blood pressure medicine where they do first 1 and then 2, then 3, then 4, I've seen people with 5 blood pressure medicines and they're still not having their blood pressure under control. And why? Because they're not getting to that root cause. That's where something like our PGX or a pharmacy consult would be very beneficial. So we can look at lifestyle, we can look at supplementation options, we can look at diet, we can look, and then we look at where finally those agents are. And more, we're doing these consults with patients and or with practitioners. Hey, I noticed I've got patient X, we share this patient, and this patient is not resolving. Have you thought about? And I'll tell you what, I have not had any practitioner that doesn't just thank me profusely for giving them some new ideas, because we're all human. We all fall into these patterns of getting the same repetition and the same groove, just like the same recipe over and over. And sometimes we just forget that there's other ingredients out there that might be beneficial.
Yeah, I like that. And so I wonder if we can get a bit more grounded in this conversation. I wonder if we can present an example report, because I think we've talked a lot around the report. I want to offer to the audience what exactly this is. How are we refining medicine, in particular prescribing of medicines, by understanding genetics? Yeah. So maybe Dr. Steph, if you want to kick us off.
Yeah. And then Gabby, I'd like us to kind of go through this together. You can see here, we've got anti-ADHD medicines, we've got anticonvulsants. There is a little bit of anti-dementia, antidepressants, and then some antipsychotics. So the report is super easy. We actually, you'll get the test that comes at home, and then you'll submit your sample. And then this test comes back. Krista, how long does it take for a PGX to come back? 7 to 10 days?
Yeah, so just to back up, when we say taking a sample at home, we mean a cheek swab. So it's a very easy, you don't have to go get blood drawn. You quite literally can do it from home insofar as we mail it back and forth. And then in the turnaround time, once the lab has it, so there's always that mail variable, but once the lab has it and our systems will let you know, usually we're looking at under a 3-week turnaround for that data to come back to you. Usually a little bit less, but we say 3 weeks just to be kind to us all. Yeah.
Under promise, over deliver. Yeah.
Exactly.
But
Usually
when you,
it is under that, but we still say
yeah.
3. Yeah.
But when you look at it, how easy it is to read. So you as the clinician or as the client can say green, yellow, red, very
Mhm.
common, good, medium, or slow down, caution, and then red, not a good idea. And so that's really helpful. Now, we do have multiple categories of different products. Do we have every drug on there? No. Do we have every category? No, but we do have like the top 200 agents. Now, Carol just says nothing is showing on her screen. Now, I can
Okay.
see
I
that
can
we're doing a
too.
screen share.
Yeah. Can we get other voices in the audience? Is anyone else able to see it or not see it? Okay, so Jessica's saying
Just
she
as
can see
she sees
it.
it.
Okay. Is there anyone else? Okay, so
I
most
see
people
it, I
are
see it, I
saying,
see it. Okay.
Okay, doctors, we'll go ahead and help Carol in the background. Carol, be watching the chat box. We will communicate with you directly. Thank you, ladies.
Okay, great.
wonderful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So, Gabby, let's look at the anti-ADH. So we've got amphetamine, which would then also include dextroamphetamine, which is Adderall. We've got Lisdex, which would be Focalin. We've got methylphenidate, which could be Ritalin. We have dexmethylphenidate, and we've got some Vyvanse in there. So if a child, say his PCP says, I think this kid is having ADHD, and they decide they're going to throw them on something, would this be helpful for a parent to run just a little cheek swab so they can have the best first aim and not be putting a kid through 2, 3, 4, 5 different agents before they find one that actually sticks?
Yeah, I mean, I think psychiatry, mental health is, the most applicable use of pharmacogenomics that we've seen recently, especially because it's such a, not fragile, but more sensitive group. We have to make sure that we establish that, trust to the provider, trust to the, even possibility that something could get better. So if we don't have something like this and they have to go through first line, second line, third line, then kind of their motivation to get better, or at least their trust in us, has to, fall a little bit. But it's definitely, something that I want all babies to have. I want all babies to have DNA 360 and a PGX, so that's how I stand on it.
Yeah. So, if any of you either had kids that someone suggested that they be on medicine, the angst of first of all making the decision to add your child to something like that. And then you go into this experimentation mode. Now, I will tell you, one of the technicians that I used to have, their son went through this whole green list, the amphetamine, the dexamphetamine, the lisdexamphetamine, the methylphenidate, and he either had severe side effects, meaning he wouldn't eat and he got super skinny, or he couldn't sleep. He had meltdowns. You see in the caution, the guanfacine was the final thing that they tried. They said, after this, we're just going to have to give up. Now, this is not his PGX. This is not representation of him, but how powerful, I bet the guanfacine is his green and all the rest on his would be yellow or red. And how great it would have been if mom could have tried that first with either the amoxicillin or the guanfacine, because once he went on guanfacine, he became a new child. He listened, he excelled, he got friends, his nourishment went up, his sleeping was back. He became a delight to be around. And that's one of the powerful things that we can see with
Yeah.
PGX.
Yeah. Yeah. As as a clinician, especially sitting on the naturopathic side of things, right? I have a very integrative practice. I work with MDs, but oftentimes I find people will come to me in the sense of, well, I've tried a medication for my ailment. I have high blood pressure. A doctor told me to take this, and the side effects were horrendous. So now I'm seeing you, right? And I would offer, there's often a lot of things that can be done within the natural space. That said, there's always going to be those cases where it truly is a case of we do need a pharmaceutical to intervene, right? And this test, this knowledge, right, is what is able to get the client and get the patient there quickly and without, to borrow Gabby's words, that erosion of trust. Because there's no, I will offer to everyone out there, there is no clinician out there that wants to harm their patient, right? Are they always thorough? Maybe not. But there's no clinician out there that is like, I'm going to give them this and they're going to get a side effect and ha ha ha, right? But what happens sometimes is if they don't have all the information, if they don't have enough information, they're picking one of several agents, maybe the one that they're most familiar with because they've either used it the most, or maybe they just recently saw a presentation on it, so it's top of mind, right? And that's not necessarily personalized to the patient. But having a list like this and knowing right off the bat, these two agents probably have some form of side effect or maybe do not engage with the person's enzymes well, right? Genes code for enzymes, their genes well. And so we probably should avoid them because we're going to have greater success with these. That really empowers both the clinician and the patient towards quickly getting to the end of wellness for this person, as opposed to kind of having to poke around in the dark for a little bit.
And Krista, I love it that you work with these providers that then come to you and say, hey, let's work together. Or you work with a patient that says, will you collaborate? We used to have collaborative medicine. You know, when I was going through school, the doctors poked and prodded and told people they were sick. The pharmacist did the prescribing and all the management. And then AMA took that away. They got a little bit of threatened because people were gravitating toward pharmacists because all of that ongoing care went to the pharmacists and, you know, they relegated us to a back room. But I want to really emphasize to people that through urgent cares or through emergency departments, every single day, there are massive amounts of mistakes. Massive. I can tell you in the past year alone, I've saved 4 lives by catching those mistakes. And 80% of those mistakes are medication related.
Yeah.
So if you don't have an idea of what works for you or doesn't work for you, and I'm not talking about just an allergic reaction, but I'm talking about drug interactions. I'm talking about a drug not interacting properly in your system. Either you can't metabolize it. So if you don't metabolize it, it stays around and the dose gets higher and higher and higher. And you're like, something's not right. Or you metabolize it too quickly and the effect that you're supposed to get becomes null and void, or it's too low to cause the effect. And then you've taken an agent, you've disrupted your system, but you've gotten minimal or no effect from it. So we have to know whether it is a supplement, whether it is a drug, whether it is an over-the-counter. I saw a question a minute ago about a non-steroidal that Susan was saying, I take ibuprofen daily for inflammation. Is that considered a pharmaceutical? It is. It's an over-the-counter pharmaceutical. And she said, it's the only chemical that I take. I haven't found a natural solution because turmeric gives me heartburn. Okay. So the first thing I would say is think omega-3s. Think green lip mussel oil, because green lip mussel oil works down the same pathways as non-steroidals, the COX-1 and COX-2, because green lip mussel oil has an extra lipid that'll go down that COX-2. Have you tried more than one form of turmeric? Because there may be another form of turmeric that you could get, because turmeric is massively anti-inflammatory. And then I would look at, if you've had your DNA 360, what do your inflammatory patterns look like? Or if you haven't had your DNA 360, that'd be a place I'd start. Let's find out, why do you have so much inflammation? What else is blocking? What can we change in your diet? What can we change in your lifestyle? What can we change to lower that overall chronic inflammation? Gabby, what other thoughts do you have about inflammation or about non-steroidals?
Not much on that front. I think something that was like crossing my mind as I was reading the comment was just, you know, I don't have a lot of shame or blame in the game when it comes to accessibility to healthcare. So I don't blame people for wanting to find that, quick solution. There's so much stress, so in terms of, anti-inflammatories all the time, obviously we don't want to make, our body reliant on something, with so many medications, they can work so well for so long. And then one day it's just not for you or it's going to hurt you. So always going into that with some, caution and some monitoring for sure.
And what I hear from you is with an end in sight. Another perfect example is omeprazole or a proton pump inhibitor that lowers. So the original studies that were done on proton pump inhibitors were 6 weeks. And then when they did some extended research after people had stayed on them for 6 months or 6 years or 16 years, is they started to develop gastric cancer. Why? Well, you can't shut down the acid. That acid barrier has multiple reasons. First, acid is how we break down parasites, bacteria, we kill them. So if you all of a sudden have a non-acidic stomach, you can let those pathogens in, and then we get into leaky gut and a number of other chronic issues. 2, we've got to break down that food. If you have undigested food going through your body. 3, you need the acid to absorb some of your minerals. So the bottom line is, maybe you've got some heartburn now that's just killing you. You need to be on that. Your prescriber wants you on it short term. Make a plan to find that underlying cause so that you can get off. And like Gabby said, let's look at other options and go, no blaming, no shaming, but let's not plan this for this to be the ever just because somebody sticks it to the wall and somebody else forgets to look underneath it.
Yeah, I think you both are bringing up really beautiful points, Steph, to borrow your words, around collaborative medicine and the idea that, especially with all the information that is afforded in this world, right? All the PGX informations, the DNA 360s, whatever blood work you might be getting, right? The intelligence of how to use that is never going to sit with just one person. It's often going to be amongst a team, and then ensuring you're empowering yourself as an advocate. I have a quick question for the audience, because I think we briefly looked at the report, and I want to remember that we looked at one page of many. I know that before, I forget her name, but there is someone in the audience who is a pharmacist. I wonder if there's other professionals, because I think a really cool part of this, and we don't have to necessarily speak to it at the professional level, but I think it's important to understand there's 2 sections to this report. There's one, this really beautiful section that Dr. Steph and Dr. Gabby have walked us through, and that it, green light, yellow light, red light. The second section, which is a little bit more for the nerds, but I want people to be aware of it in concept. There's a second section that says this agent, especially if it's a yellow or a red light, this is why it's a yellow or a red light, right? Because this report is not going to ban any medication for you, right? If you get this report back, and even if it's in a red column, right? The question is, what is the contraindication? Why don't your genes and this drug work together? And how do we adjust for that, right? I think maybe if you two want to speak to the power of how a clinician can use this, right? And the fact that this report is one of many tools that clinicians will be using as they support prescriptions.
Gabby, I'm going to let you start that. I'm going to answer a couple of questions that I saw come
That was
in.
good. I just kind of want to emphasize, this information is important. And there have been some incidents in the past couple of years where patients will get this, not have a provider look at it from other companies, of course, and they'll just stop their medication, which ends up being, a bad thing if their medication that they're supposed to be on maintenance isn't tapered down properly. So definitely the focus is making sure that we have somebody to, verify this with, that we can make those safe choices. And also, there are guidelines coming out now for deprescribing under the pharmacist scope, which is amazing. So, in terms of collaborating with the physician, I think this is something that, they might not just have like the bandwidth to kind of go into the details, but we do. So we can offer that up. And I think this really backs up, or the report really backs up what, our science is, right? So.
Exactly.
I love that. I love that, the idea of deprescribing. And so for the
Yes.
audience, what she means by that, when you're prescribing something, it means you're helping someone go onto a medication for a specific reason. With deprescribing, it's the idea that that reason is no longer motivating the need for the medication, and so let's bring you off it. Or maybe the reason's still there, but we want to change course because for whatever reason that agent isn't helpful anymore.
Mhm. And a lot of times the primary care providers get exactly 7 minutes to see you, make a decision and go, where we get much longer. Patients get to tell us their story. They get to move on. We were talking about Susan and her NSAIDs, and then she's added some more. Yes, she's tried multiple versions of turmeric, but they think it's actually a salicylate insensitive or sensitivity. So that would wipe out the whole category. Okay, so then the omega-3s would work better. And she has a couple other issues going on. She also has problems in her DNA reducing oxidative stress. So this is a perfect example of getting your DNA 360 profile, finding out other ways to reduce oxidative stress through diet, lifestyle, whether it is through a red light therapy, whether it's through a PEMF mat, whether it's through a sauna, maybe some foods that you can take that will help knock that down. So you can avoid the salicylates, you can avoid taking the ibuprofen, and we work around. I like to describe the DNA in our body. Western medicine likes to put us in boxes. There's a cardiology box. There's a gynecological box. Here is the neurological box. Here is the orthopedic box. But we're really like a skeleton watch where all the cogs work together and everything impacts everything. So when we can see your DNA and we can see which cogs or islands are separated and the bridges aren't there, then we'll help you build a bridge so that that can all start working and you can get all the way around and not be stuck on one island and feel like you're stuck.
I like the holism that both of you bring to this. Like, to me, it's very interesting to hear two PharmDs whose academic and clinical training is in the prescription or deprescribing of pharmaceuticals sit there and say, sure, this is one tool, but there's many other we have to consider in holism, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Now, one of the things that we will be doing tonight is we will be allowing you to put specific questions into our Q&A. And we usually talk for, I don't know, another 10, 15 minutes about the report. We're going to show some more of the report. We're going to give you some other ideas. But if you've got specific questions, put those in the Q&A so we can address it directly. I did see a couple people say, we had Croatia is one of the most beautiful places in the world. We had a fabulous guest from Croatia. She said, thank you from lovely Croatia. It's past midnight. I got to go to bed. Just know if you have to jump off, you will be sent a replay. So you will, and look, our questions went from 2 to 10, just like that. I love a participatory audience. Let's get those questions going so we can answer that. The whole part of the DNA company, and as we've grown in the last couple of years, is serving our audience to answer your questions, serving to make DNA not such a scary, far out, question or problem. Again, when I was back in pharmacy school, genetics, all they were like little pea plants you put together and what color were your peas going to be, or little flies and where the fly is going to come, or what color your eyes. It's like, oh my gosh, I have blue eyes and my mom has green eyes. How did that happen? But genetics have come so far that we can talk about how you think, how you behave, whether you're resistant to taking in new ideas, whether you have a tendency toward, certain things, why you feel, why you don't feel. Some people say, I just feel flat. I just feel dead. And then somebody wants to shove a pill at them. Well, no, you make enough neurotransmitter. You just clear it so quickly. It's like not enough is ever around. Those are all the things that we now know. And through the DNA 360 report, we can show. Now, did our new version come out, or we're like this close to it coming out? Okay, so we have 72 actionable genes. There's a lot of companies out there that will do fun to know genes, like you can curl your tongue. Yes, I can. I didn't need a genetic test to know that. You know, can you guys do yours? No.
No.
Different genes. Okay. But that's not going to actionably help your health. To know the MTHFR, which is very popular, will. But guess what? We have 4 other methylation genes. And so we can really dig into methylation. We have, 4 really good glutathione genes. All of those are going to be part of your detoxification, your clarification, your cleaning you up. Maybe you have trouble with rest and recovery and you feel like you have to push through everything when actually your body says, I would heal better if you give me some time off. That's what our test shows you. And by coupling it with a PGX and knowing which categories of drugs you need, which ones you don't, which one that may, and we're not going to say absolutely, but we're going to say may give you better. So I can tell you, I had an 86-year-old patient who developed dementia and Alzheimer's, and they gave him just about everything you could give with no resolution of his anxiety, of his depression, on and on and on. Well, we did his DNA 360, and guess what we found? First of all, he was an undiagnosed celiac. Okay. And the celiac genes that he had led to depression, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia. Got him on a strict dairy-free or strict gluten-free diet. Second thing we found was that he did not thrive on SSRIs. In fact, he had a major side effect and developed hyponatremia. That's where his kidneys started flushing all the sodium out of his body, and he got more and more delirious to the point where they're like, oh, dawdling old guy. But what it was low sodium. Once we looked at that and said, he's on the completely wrong medicines, we pulled him off of that. So we changed his diet. We got him up in the morning, got him outside, got light in his eyes so that he could make more melatonin to sleep at night and not be up wandering all night. And then we got him on agents that were appropriate for his DNA. He became where he could speak again. He lost his word salad and came back. He could talk to his family. He was compliant with his caregivers. Did it fix everything? It didn't, but it sure made his quality of life so much more beneficial. And when we could show that report to the family and they could show it to his caregivers, it was just, there was just weeping and hugs, because it was like the answers that nobody had known or seen. And rather than losing their father to just being, a vegetable or blithering or frustration, they actually got more time with their dad. And that is really the beauty of a product like this.
Yeah. I like that you've expanded the conversation from it's important to know how genes interact with pharmaceuticals, but separate to that, it's important to know how your genes interact with your body and found your body, and that pharmaceuticals aren't the only answer. They're one of the answers, but not the only answer. Yeah.
Let's go ahead and pop that up again. I know a couple of people had trouble seeing it, but let's pop it up and let's go to page 8. We were on page 6. Let's see if that helps.
Yeah.
I think that, go ahead.
I was going to say what we can do too, especially if the text is too small, Dr. Steph, if you want to say a specific drug class, we can kind of zoom into that.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So I thought this one might be interesting, because what we can see here, let me pick one. All right, let's pull into like the middle of the page, right above that blue line that says surgery, to the selective serotonin reuptake. And we know those as SSRIs. And if we can blow that up.
However, is that B can just make the screen a little bit focused there. There they are.
Well, mine is still the same size. Are you guys the same size, or did it get bigger?
No, it's still the same size.
Okay.
Marianne is saying page is black though. So Marianne, it might just take a second to refresh. Okay, Steph, why don't you get started? Maybe we're not going to be able to magic.
Oh, there it is.
Oh,
Much
look
better.
at that. Look at the magic.
Ask and you shall receive. So what we can see here on that selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors is in the green, we see fluoxetine. And then we see in the yellow, a majority of other meds that are out there, the citalopram, the escitalopram, paroxetine, the sertraline. You know, I'm not going to ask you, but how many of you have seen these names, or how many of you are taking these and wonder, what does my PGX look like? Am I green? Am I yellow? Am I red? Have I had side effects? Maybe I'm having a side effect now. Gabby, do you want to go through some of the side effects that people might be feeling on SSRIs that they don't even realize are side effects?
Yeah, I mean, random ones like stomach discomfort and also, some rashes. I think probably help me out here, Dr. Nielsen,
No,
just in the
no.
guise of what we're talking about.
I think sometimes
All
people
of
won't
those are
even feel
great.
great on SSRIs. The goal is to help elevate, not necessarily elevate, but stabilize and neutralize mood. One of the side effects is straight up you don't feel that way. You actually feel worse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep. Skin is very much a common one. I think GI upset in general is going to be up there. I'm trying to think, Dr. Steph, have you seen any like crazy out there ones?
Well, crazy is the way you can put it. Sometimes when they overlap with other drugs, you get something called serotonin syndrome. So what happens is you feel so wound up that you feel like you've been on 10 cups of coffee, and you're just like, your heart is racing, your hands are shaking, and you're like, I don't know what's going on with me. You're just trying to, when you're on an SSRI, you're trying to have your day feel a little brighter. You're trying to be able to get out of bed and function. You're trying to be able to just be more productive and less reactive. But if you're not feeling more productive and less reactive, it may not be the right agent for you. My stomach hurts. I feel fatigued. I've got, my skin is irritated and I'm itching all the time. And you're just like, I just don't feel well. And you call your provider and they say, give it a month. You're like, I can't get through another couple hours, let alone a month. That may not be the right, drug for you. And I think it's really important for people to know you have a PhD in your body. I want you to swear to me right now. I will take responsibility and stand up and say, I don't feel good until somebody listens to you. And I don't know if I can get permission for doing this, but our CEO's sister had a tragic drug interaction. And, she couldn't advocate for herself. She wasn't able to because of the state she was in. And it resulted in a severe drug interaction that took her life. And I think part of the reason we brought the PGX on is Tracy's commitment to mental health, Tracy's commitment to making sure people have a test like the PGX, so the same thing doesn't happen to them or one of their family members that happened to hers. Because did it have to happen? It didn't. Did anyone try to make it happen? They didn't. But you add her psychosis, her schizophrenia, and then a cocktail of medicines, it was too much. It was too much. And so I was not surprised at all.
Why we brought this in.
Yeah.
No, Tracy's very open and public about that,
She
because
is.
had this test been part of it, would it have fixed everything? No, there was several other things that were going wrong, but this would have been an integral part to know based on DNA and how she would respond to certain medications. That was part of it.
And that's been the impetus for all the growth. We started with one single test. We now have the DNA breast 360. We now have the DNA gut. We now have the DNA aging. We now have, we have such a broad palette, and we're continuing to add test, don't guess. And the reason that we are is because more and more we have to take control of our health. We have to partner with our providers. They work for you. And if you can give them documentation, whether they understand DNA or not, whether they understand a PGX or not, we've made it so simple. Green, yellow, red. That's pretty doggone obvious to say. You
Well,
want me
I
on one
want
of these
to
classes?
I want to preempt a little bit because I'm looking at one of the questions in the Q&A. So I'm gonna break from form a little bit and answer one of the Q&As because I think it's relevant to this. And they were saying, you know, does it get more specific? Is it kind of just this colorization of like good, bad, ugly? And I would offer, it does offer more information. So what this test is based on, and I think this understanding the science behind it is really important. As drugs are released and adverse events, or as we know, intended events happen, different doctors will report them, as well as when you're conducting studies in order to assess for the efficacy of medication, they will report, you know, this negative outcome, this negative thing happened. As we build up those libraries of adverse events alongside bigger and bigger libraries of people's genes, we're able to make some connections. Namely, if a person has this gene and they take this agent, we know it's going to be bad news bears. We know it's not going to go very well. Okay. And then for certain medications, especially medications that are taken often, or we have a large data pool of evidence, right? We're able to take it even a step further beyond kind of the green, yellow, red categorization and say, if you have this gene and you're taking this drug, it means this drug maybe isn't going to be as effective. You have to take more to get the outcome. Or maybe this drug, you only need a little bit because you're super sensitive to it, so you shouldn't be doing the full recommended dose. Or maybe it's going to say this drug straight up is not going to interact well with your genes, and we highly recommend against it for this because of this reason of how it engages with certain genes and enzymes, right? So there is, if you scroll down in this report and you get into some of the more refined detail that typically is just offered to clinicians, okay? We are able to speak more to it, okay? And it's all to the end of this is what the evidence says. Okay, so just to answer that question, Steph, I think you make a really, really good point in that we do have this categorization, but the report, especially when put in the hands of a provider, they're able to adjust dosings, they're able to adjust agents, and then they're also able to say, this is yellow, but really that yellow just means I have to give you more or less compared to, oh dear, this is red, and this is why we're not going to use this agent, period. Right. So the detail further on in the report is fleshed out. And I think that's really important because it comes from an evidence base of people's genes and research and reports.
And
Yeah.
they may make no change. When it's in yellow, it's
Yeah.
also just observe, be
Mhm.
aware.
Mhm.
Is there anything to watch for? Or let's heighten our awareness. Let's hope we see nothing. But
Mhm.
let's just be aware that if something pokes up its head, we
Mhm.
know that we may want to adjust course, either adjust dose, adjust frequency,
Yeah.
or adjust agents. So just because
Mhm.
something's in yellow doesn't mean you can't be on it. It's
Mhm.
just a keep your heads up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. And that dovetails a little bit into a question I believe David is asking. So David, I'm going to bring your question forward. And he's saying, will the results of this test be different at different ages? He's 66 now, love it, and wondering if the results are going to be good for the rest of the life. And so I'll give an answer to that in so far as your genes are never going to change. Your genes are yours. The gods that be gave them to you, the gods that be aren't going to take them away from you. This said, the science may change. So right now I say, and Gabby, Steph, please correct me if I'm wrong. I would say a PGX, if you were to get it today, it's probably going to be good for another 3 to 5 years. And then at that point in time, you're probably going to want to retest, not because your genes are different, but because the level of evidence and the amount of evidence that we have is bigger, and there's going to be new recommendations embedded within the reports, right? That won't be necessarily for some of the bigger classes, right? Like we know our statins pretty well when it comes to a genetic perspective, but there's a lot of new immunologics and there's a lot of different drug classes that are emerging, and we don't have data on them now, but in 5 years, we probably will. So David, to answer your question, while your genes aren't going to change, the level of evidence will change. And so I would say, and again, Gabby, Steph, please hold me honest. Would you say 3 to 5 years is a reasonable period that you'd want to be retesting this?
Well, what I would say is it depends on his needs.
Okay.
So one, kidney function may go down.
Mhm.
Two, digestion may shift. Three,
Mhm.
so we would adjust according to kind of his metabolic health.
Sure.
And maybe on here, as you can see with the one that's on screen, the only thing we see under hypnotics is a single agent. And maybe in 3 or 4 or 5 years, we have 5 agents. And so
Mhm.
there's going to be a better scope. So I would say retest for 2 reasons. One, a category that's listed has little to no information because in 3 to 5 years it will. Or 2, a category that wasn't listed on here may be listed now. And you could always ask first, hey, I noticed you don't have, well, and I know Gabby's real up on all of her oncolytic agents and neoplastics, those come out all the time. So God forbid, Dave, and we're not going to say this, but at 75, if you ended up with some kind of a cancer and they were looking at chemotherapy, it would be a great time to retest and look specifically at what chemotherapy agents would be the best to optimize care for you. So.
Yeah, we have a comment actually in the chat from April. She says, reaccess, don't retest.
Mhm. Yeah. 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 No, I by and large agree with that, assuming there's not new genes added or separately to Dr. Steph's point, there's not new agents added.
Mm-hmm. But we're constantly updating, expanding, adding new
Mhm.
genes, adding new agents. So
Mhm.
reaccess, I can't tell you how many times. I think I tested my DNA for the first time with the DNA company.
Mhm.
I'd done a couple other companies 2.5 years ago, maybe. And like almost every webinar on, almost every podcast I'm on, I pull them up to look at them. And I see a new thing every time. So reaccess, I know it's a long report and all, but
Mhm.
either get it on your phone or more importantly, we have our DNA Way app. You can put down whether your iPhone or Android, get that DNA app on your phone and you can access what your pathways look like. What are some common tips for those pathways? Have that at your fingertips so that you truly have access to how do you process and how do you show up in life and how can we help you show up better.
I love that, the idea of just how to show up better in life. Yeah. So I wonder if we transition to all of the questions and answers, and a special good night to Nina. She's our Croatian that's leaving the chat.
We've all been
It's always
invited to go to
good.
Croatia, so she's got luxury apartments. Let's go.
I love it. I'm part Croatian, so I love any excuse I have to go back.
Yeah, and I also see that in the chat, if you guys don't see it yet, the App Store and the Google Play Store are there, and you can download the app right now on your phone. If you look at those, you can click on those, or you can click on that link and send it to yourself and access it from your phone.
All right. So we're going to dig into some of the questions, and I think, Steph, people really took you up on your offer to kind of dig into the personalization here.
Oh,
So Deb, it sounds like this is a child within Deb's life, possibly Deb's, or sorry, Dee's. Oh, mon Dieu, I can't see that far. I need new glasses. Okay, so Dee is saying, any suggestions? My 12-year-old broke out with a body rash following amoxicillin. Now takes, oh, I'm not going to be able to say this right.
azithromycin.
Thank you. So can I tell a funny story before we continue with this?
Sure.
So as a naturopath in Ontario, we have access to prescribing rights. In order to access that, you have to take a pharmacy test, and it's a 3-part test, right? And one of the parts is an oral interview where they will give you various cases and they'll say, here's the patient, how would you prescribe for them? And that interview, that oral interview is about an hour, and they give you 3 vignettes and you have to speak to each. And partway through the first vignette, so maybe, 10 minutes into this, the person who is interviewing me or testing me was a pharmacist, and they said, I'm going to stop you for a second. You cannot pronounce any of this, and if you continue to try to pronounce it, you're going to fail. I want you to write the agent down, and you can just point at the agent. Don't bother pronouncing it. I passed. I want the record to say I passed, but not because I could pronounce anything. So I still take that. I write stuff down and I point to it when people ask me what agent I'm talking about. So I appreciate you, Steph. Gabby, you guys are going to have to continue to do this for me throughout this entire presentation. So, based on those two agents that I'm not going to bother trying, is he going to outgrow this? Any suggestions? I guess the very beautiful human concern is Dee has a child where there is a pharmaceutical that was offering bad reaction, right? Maybe a PGX could have predicted that, maybe not. They switched. And the question is, will this person potentially grow out of it, right? Any thoughts?
Gabby, do you want to start with this one or would you rather I do?
We can start.
Okay.
Thanks.
So with amoxicillin, this is a penicillin family drug. What I would say is, are there any penicillin allergies in the family? A rash is not indicative of a lifelong allergy. It's more indicative of a microbiome dis-ease. Okay, so, and not saying this is your kid, but I'm saying it likely is. I'm saying they like sweets, they have too many carbs, their gut is not balanced. And so when the amoxicillin went in, it was disrupting the bugs, but some of the good bugs then and some of the bad bugs maybe were kind of fighting each other, and you got a histaminic release, and that histamine caused the rash. Think of the skin. You got the outside of the donut and you have the inside of the donut. The inside of the donut is from your mouth to your anus. That's the gut. The outside of the donut is what you see on the skin. Whatever is happening on the inside of that donut is also happening on the outside. The gut was not happy with that drug. Azithromycin is a whole different class of drugs. They will likely not have a problem with azithromycin. It will cure whatever infection it is, but this is your opportunity, and this is a heads up. It's time to go check that gut. So probiotics, pull back on the carbohydrates, pull back on the fruit, get rid of desserts. Let's get more whole foods. Blueberries, great. Blueberry muffins, not so much. You know, chicken, great. Chicken nuggets, not so much. And people say, but he's a kid. Yes. But I want you to think about your kid. You're training your kid what to eat. If you train them to eat packaged things now, they will always crave artificial flavors, artificial sweeteners, artificial. We want the body to crave healthy, and we want to, this body is the most beautiful temple you're ever going to have. It only knows how to process real food. And so let's clean that gut up. You should mark with the pharmacy that he had a minor allergic reaction, which was a rash. Do not have them mark that off as a never, ever, ever again. Give it some time that you clean up the diet and get some probiotics in. And then should they need it in the future, it should be safe, but monitored. Gabby, would you add anything else?
No, yeah, just to kind of speak to the gut telling you what to crave, right? Sure, Dr. Koshner, you have a better way to say this, but like we're just feeding them, right? They're so used to having it. We're just feeding those microbiomes. So we're not really giving an opportunity for the beneficial ones to grow around there. So definitely. And then, yeah, you know, I have a penicillin allergy and I had to grow out of it. There was no other option for me at some point. So it was okay because when I had it, I was really young. And then when I was an adult and I had to take it, it was just a little bit of discomfort, but it does kind of start to ease with time, at least for me, it did.
Yeah.
See, now my husband's the opposite. He is anaphylactic with penicillin. He actually wears a bracelet that says no penicillin. We know that if he has to ever on the rare occasion be seen, it is like no penicillin class, and no cephalosporin, because that, you know, can have cross sensitivity. So the good thing is a rash is not deadly. We just don't want it to develop. And fortunately, Gabby got her gut cleaned up. And when her gut cleaned up, then her body could respond. I hope that helped.
Yeah, no, I like that counseling. And I think to an extent, that's the power of a pharmacist, because pharmacists will see, here's the common reactions, and here's a common thread between some people that have those reactions. And here's what we can do in anticipation thereof, right? Cleaning up the gut and making sure we're seeding health from the gut as opposed to from an antibiotic, which is quite a powerful shift, I think, in perspective of pharmacology. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Marie has a question, and Gabby, I'll probably get your help here in pronouncing. I can do methotrexate. I know that much. I don't think I'm going to be able to get the other
Okay.
agents. So,
Oh no.
Gabby, okay. In a second,
I'm
Gabby or Steph are going to announce the agents, but Marie's asking after 3 agents that can cause gut issues, and no matter how much you try to help your gut, these medications cause injury to the gut, right? And so I think this is to an extent a building question from what we last discussed, right? Some medications, Gabby and Steph will speak to them, they harm the gut bacteria, right? You have to take them for a variety of reasons, right? We're not necessarily questioning that, but they will harm gut bacteria. What are some intelligent protocols you would have for supporting when you're taking an agent that is going to disrupt the gut biome, right, disfavorably? What are some protocols or what are some thoughts that you have around protecting, supporting, and rebuilding the gut biome after such a course of medication?
I'll start it, and then I think Dr.
Please,
Nielsen will
please. Yeah.
grow on it. But with these meds, diarrhea, vomiting is very high. So making sure that you're hydrated throughout. Definitely try to decrease the inflammation around there. So, just off the top, like omega-3s might be helpful. And I'll just read the medications for you, and Dr. Nielsen can continue. So meflonomide, methotrexate, and Hyrimoz.
Thank you.
Okay.
Steph, I know you're all things probiotic, and I already have an approximation of your answer, but please, so Gabby, enjoy this, because this is like giving Steph candy. This is like giving that 12-year-old boy some candy. You're gonna see her eyes get wide, and she's gonna be like, oh my gosh, guys, you can do this and this and this and this and this and this and this. So Gabby, get ready. Go ahead,
Yes.
Steph.
So, Marie, one thing that I would say, there's a wonderful product that is actually made by a man named Zach Bush. Zach is triple board certified, and he was an oncology researcher and actually made chemotherapy agents. It's called Restore. And it literally, and I think they changed the name lately, it's ION, ION, but it will help bind your tight junctions. So every place that these go in, these chemotherapy agents go in and destroy, ion will help rebuild those tight junctions and knit the gut back together. Second thing is, what are you doing with probiotic foods? Probiotic foods are fermented foods. Now, if you have a histamine issue, that could be different, but sauerkrauts, kimchis, fermented pickles, kefir. If you can't do dairy, you can do water kefir. Homemade apple cider vinegar. I make my own homemade apple cider vinegar, which is actually apple scrap vinegar. You take the scraps off the outside, you take the cores, you slice up the apples, you put fresh purified water in, you put a little bit of sugar, and then I take a live, one of my old ones, but I started with just a live apple cider, put just a couple tablespoons in. It ferments in the dark for about 8 weeks, and it starts bubbling, and then you have the mother and the Scooby, and then, but even some apple cider vinegar daily will go in and help rebalance that acid-base balance, help that healthy bacteria going. So you could look at spore-based probiotics. Spore-based are like planting a seed, and then they multiply and multiply and multiply. A lot of probiotics, when you put them in, they will last for 1 to 2 weeks. Well, 1 to 2 weeks is fine, but if you use the same strain all the time, you're not mixing up your strains. So we want to use one type this month, and the next month use another type, and the next month have one that has 3, 4, 5 in there. I am less concerned about 50 billion units and 15 billion units as the variety. And that's where our Gut 360 would come in. So a Gut 360 is going to say what healthy bacteria is surviving this nuclear bomb that you're setting off for your autoimmunity, this looks like, or what areas have the bad guys really taken over? And then we can give you specific recommendations for which specific species can go in and do this. A lot of times women will come in with yeast infections or urinary tract infections, and they want to just use a lactobacillus, and it's like, no, you need rhabinosis, you need, Formiculus, and so we can guide them towards specific pathogens that can help heal those. So a gut 360 could be very, very beneficial, but the lifestyle stuff between ion, between probiotic foods, between taking a probiotic regularly, and reducing your stress. Clearly, your body is under a lot of stress. We need to make sure those detox pathways are augmented and that you're taking time to love on yourself so that you can put yourself in maximum healing mode.
I love that. Thank you, Steph. And
Yeah.
Marie, it's good to see you again. Welcome back. Okay, Steph, this question is for you. Robin was asking, and actually I saw a lot of chitter chatter in the chat when you first mentioned this. Do you want to speak a little bit more to the green
green lip muscle? Sorry, when I was typing, I had my fingers over one, so my MUSSEL did a DDRI. So okay, what it is green lip muscle. See, you can see we're live. Green lip muscle. I like green lip muscle out of New Zealand because they have very clean and pure waters there. Green lip muscle has some extra omega-3s that other forms of omega-3 oils don't have. And it can come in a dry capsule form, it can come in a liquid form, but the pathways for that anti-inflammatory activity, a lot like Celebrex or celecoxib goes down COX-1. Problem with COX-1 pathways is you can erode your stomach lining, similar to what we were talking about with ibuprofen. If you go down COX-2 builds up that stomach lining. Green lip muscle goes down both pathways, so you get the most effective anti-inflammatory without those side effects. So that's why I love green lip muscle oil. And you don't need very much. It is not, at least the ones I've used, has not been very fishy, and can just come in a capsule or can come in a gel cap. And it is amazing. I've given it to my dogs for hip dysplasia. I've given it to my parents for joint, osteoarthritis. I've taken it myself for brain cognition. I've given it to itty bitty babies. I broke a capsule open, put it on their tongue because they were having trouble eliminating pooping. And with half a capsule on the tongue, and the baby would, within a day, they'd start pooping again. So yeah, I really love all the anti-inflammatory activity of green lip muscle oil.
Yeah. Yeah. And just, I guess my only comment would be just to be mindful of if there is a seafood or shellfish, depending where you come from, seafood or shellfish allergy, just to be mindful of that, because you will probably not be a candidate for that.
However, I will tell you because it's the oil and not the protein, most of it is separated so that there is not usually a shellfish allergy. But if you have a severe shellfish allergy, I would not probably take it.
So for audience clarity, allergies are usually based off the protein. And so there's an element of trusting that the company is purifying it properly such that all the protein is gone. But if you're an anaphylactic allergy, that might be a risk you just don't want to be taking.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Next question. Oh, mon Dieu, all those medications.
Dilaudid.
Thank you. I was taking what Steph just said to help with pain, but it barely did anything in terms of reducing pain. Why would that be? Is that because of certain genes?
Susan, that's exactly what the PGX is about. Dilaudid is an extremely strong medicine, hydromorphone, and it knocks most people on their tushies. But if it didn't knock you on your tushy, then yes, I would bet that your body clears it really rapidly through your gene system, and that there will be other choices for you. That is a perfect situation where if you need to be on it regularly, now a lot of times they use it short term for kidney stones, or they use it post-surgery if somebody has problem with oxycodone. But if you are supposed to take it and the edge isn't coming off, time to get your PGX so we can help you find agents that would be more beneficial for you.
Yeah.
Do you think maybe Dr. Nielsen, that she also might be a poor metabolizer? Like she can still experience the side effects and just not any of the pain relief too. So she might be on either side.
Yep. I think that's a great analysis. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. All right. Joy has the question. I think this kind of has been spoken to, but I'll still offer it in case there's anything Gabby or Steph you want to add. So Joy is asking if you have hives with amoxicillin. Yes, point for me. Does that constitute an actual allergy? So the answer we heard was no. Is there anything else that you'd like to further offer, Joy, there?
So when we look at allergies, if you look from an allergy immunology perspective, they look at IgE, immunoglobulin E related, and it tends to be anaphylaxis. So hives is a form of inflammation. Hives is an allergic reaction. If you have large wheal and flare, I would call it an allergy because it can progress into something more severe, and especially shortness of breath or a full anaphylactic. If it's a small little rash and it's a little itchy, that is less of an issue. But when you can specifically say, I get hives consistently every time I have it, I would call amoxicillin and all penicillins off. The next thing I would go to would be cephalosporins or the erythromycins like the macrolides. Azithromycin tends to work all the time. Stay away from it. I'm just going to say this is my personal bias. Stay away from clindamycin. Clindamycin is so strong, and I'm starting to watch dentists prescribe it like water. Clindamycin is so strong, and they'll do it like if you're going to go have your teeth cleaned and they want to make sure that you don't have any problems, stay with the cephalosporins. Clindamycin can cause an overgrowth because remember, you're killing the bad bugs, but you're killing the good bugs too. An overgrowth of a severe pathogen called C. difficile. Once you get C. difficile, and I can tell you in our clinic right now, we have more than 12 active cases of C. diff. Once you get it, you'll never get it. You'll never get rid of it. It is going to be dormant where you got it, you're out of it. Not it, you got it, you're out of, I've actually started calling some of the dentists and saying, please, do we have to use clindamycin? Is this person so bad? And they're like, no, I just know it works. And I'm like, I have 12 active cases of C. diff and they're having to use Vanco now. And they're like, I had no idea because it's highly contagious, highly repetitive. And they kind of got on a kick. I'm guessing the clindamycin rep, which just did a really good job, kudos, but you're spreading disease throughout the community because it's being overused. So with an amoxicillin allergy, cephalosporins, macrolides, azithromycin, try to keep to that if you can, or sulfas if you can tolerate them.
Yeah. I love that idea, especially with a PGX or a similar sort of test that, when a doctor is considering an agent, you're able to bring it forward not only to the end of what is the best fit for you, but just also to prime their memory as to other agents that they can consider. Because I would imagine you heard the answer of those doctors. None of them are doing this maliciously. It's just that it's the most active muscle that they have right now for whatever reason it is.
Yep. And be careful with dosing. I was seeing super high dosing on kids' antibiotics. Amoxicillin or ampicillin is normally dosed at 45 milligrams per kilogram at kind of the low normal and 90 milligrams per kilogram. And I was seeing everybody coming out of urgent care at 90 milligrams per kilogram. I'm like, everybody is not on their deathbed. So again, I called some of the prescribers and said, what is the diagnosis? And they're like, well, we think it's an ear infection. I'm like, can we half the dose so we don't blow it out and this becomes not usable for them? And they're like, sure, what do you recommend? And, this is the advantage of being around for almost 40 years and being able to collaborate and say, gosh, these are the trends we're seeing. And I don't want to hurt the patient. And I don't want that to come back on you, but I want the patient to heal. When they said, okay, they have an undiagnosed pneumonia, they've already failed on this other agent, then it's like, okay, heads together. Let's brainstorm. Let's layer a couple different mechanisms and let's knock it out. And again, everybody wins that way. They win because they're good at diagnosing and what they see.
Yeah.
And we're good at collaborating together. So literally, you've got to take care of your health. You've got to advocate for yourself. You've got to come armed with information because you're paying that provider to coach you, but they're not the be all end all. And if you don't like what they're saying, then you need to get a new provider because if they're resisting you or if they're not listening to you, then that's not somebody who's in your camp, and you want somebody in your camp, working with you, with your paradigm and with your body, because this is your N of one and we want you to win.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that. I love that. And I think that's why it's so important that the Dr. Gabbies and the Dr. Stephs of the world exist, because no one person can store all this information in their head. It is truly a team effort. Yeah. I'm not seeing any other questions in our question box. There was one comment from Tracy, and so I want to honor that just before we close up for this evening. So Tracy is asking around methylene blue, and so this sits not necessarily in the pharmaceutical space, but I guess more it's treated like a nutraceutical, I think, at this point.
Nope, it was the very first pharmaceutical ever licensed. And it is still
Oh,
the very first
well, look at
pharmaceutical
you correcting
licensed
me. Look
ever.
at you. I love that. She was waiting on that one, and I love it. Thank you so very much for calling me on it. Yeah, okay. All right. So it's treated to an extent. It's an over-the-counter at this point in time. I do not believe you need prescription. Oh,
Nope. In the US, if you're going to get it liquid, you need a prescription. There are some groups that you can buy it in combination with other things. And depending on the state, it's kind of iffy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess, would you like to speak to this? So Tracy's asking, would you recommend it for IBD, diabetes, or sorry, inflammatory disease, not IBD, inflammatory disease, just a lot of the constellation of very inflammatory conditions?
Yes, yes, and yes. So I love methylene blue. I had read quite a bit about it, but had not experienced it for myself. And I'm always loving to try stuff. So I actually had one of my friends who came with a blue tongue one day. And I'm like, what have you been doing? You've been eating some kind of, blue popsicle? And he's like, no, I do methylene blue. And I'm like, huh? So it oxygen transports. It is super good as an anti-inflammatory. That could be another thing that Maria could use for pain relief. Great for inflammatory disease, great for blood sugar control, great for brain cognition. Okay. 2 to 3 drops. Now you've got to make sure, depending on the form, I prefer that you get something. There's several groups now that are making like troches or like a gum. I prefer that you get some of those. The drops tend to be more pharmaceutical grade, and they use them in laboratories for like tissue samples. You've got to make sure that if you get the liquid form, that they don't have heavy metals in them, because otherwise you're going to be taking a bunch of heavy metals. It's critical that you get the analysis on that. So take one of the more reputable brands, but great for long COVID. Anytime somebody's feeling blah, anytime they're feeling down, 2-3 drops in a glass of water, slam it down. Within 15 minutes, you get this rush of oxygen and you're like, oh, it feels really good. So if you need help, if you need energy, any kind of chronic inflammation, methylene blue is great. Tracy, what a great recommendation. And again, I think for all of you that we're talking about other anti-inflammatories, I didn't even think of methylene blue. Thank you for bringing that up.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right, ladies. I think that might be where we start to close up and tidy up our conversation this evening, because I'm not seeing any other questions from our audience, but I'm very grateful to the audience. We had a big turnout tonight, and there's obviously a lot of interest in the overlap of genetics and pharmaceuticals. And so I will offer a quick plug. I think if anyone's wanting to further deepen this conversation, don't hesitate in particular to reach out to Gabby or Dr. Gutierrez, because she's happy to have these conversations with people. I know it's a big passion of yours to ensure that people get access to that collaborative medicine and get access to information so that
Gabby,
they can.
will you drop your email in there for everybody? And yes, Robert, thank you. Transcriptions was the one that I couldn't think of the name. I could see it, but thank you for that. Transcription sells a great methylene blue and actually has MDs on staff that are monitoring everything. So there's Gabby's email.
Yeah.
We value all of you being here. We value your interest. We value your questions. Well, thanks, Jessica. We love you too. And remember, you can always come back to these. You'll be sent out a link, and you will be able to watch this again, get your DNA report out, go through and see, am I taking things that I need? Am I having problems that maybe I should go through it with somebody, we're here to help. And the more you educate yourself, the more you advocate for yourself, the more we can help you. And we really just bless you all dearly. And thank you for being here. Thank you for sticking with us. All right. Take care,
Thank
guys.
you guys.
Au revoir. Bonne nuit,
Good night.
mesdames.
God bless. Mwah.